Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're looking at two things from a bygone era, the expansion pack and the Aliens vs. Predator game franchise. AVP was one of the greatest ideas when it came to gaming. You had one game with 3 different games within it. AVP is one of those things where you have 2 villains duking it out for supremacy with us squishy humies right in the middle. Well, Third Law decided to do a little different. They didn't want to just have 2 villains, they wanted to have 3! And thus today, ladies and gentlemen, we're taking a look at AVP 2, Primal Hunt.
Aliens vs. Predator 2 Primal Hunt was an expansion pack for Aliens vs. Predator 2 and was developed by Third Law Interactive and released in 2001 for PCs and only PCs. No console trash could handle its greatness. The menus, ladies and gentlemen, are just as good in AVP 2 Primal Hunt as they were in base AVP 2. Each species has a fully 3D model, although they're not as animated as the one seen in AVP 2. The menus still sound really good with the sound effects in the background. The loading screens are still animated for each species, and this is an example of a menu system that was designed by people who actually gave a damn about the fans and who actually cared about what they were working on. Like base AVP2, AVP2 Primal Hunt is a first-person shooter, and like in AVP2, the first-person shooting varies from character to character. For Dunya, the first-person shooting is of a classical style. There is no iron sight aiming, and everything is pretty much hit scan. You're going to need to have a quick trigger finger, because there's gonna be a lot of Xenos ready to rend your absolutely sexy flesh. As for the Predator, most of your weapons are not going to be that useful. The one weapon you're going to be using pretty much the entire time is the combi stick. This thing is absolutely devastating and turns what is a mini-boss in Dunya's campaign into just another pleb for the slaughter. The Predator campaign is fairly easy when compared to the Corporate Mercenary and the Predalien campaign, and that's because the Predator is always OP as fuck. The Predalien campaign is actually 3 mini-campaigns, similar to the Alien campaign in AVP 2. Here, you start out as a humble facehugger, move on to the mighty chestburster, and finally become the mighty Predalien. The lion's share of the campaign is as the Predalien. Here, you're gonna be a hacker and slasher of high prices. The Predalien campaign is slightly more difficult than the Predator campaign. There is very limited, shall we say, human resources to go around, and you need to husband your snacks wisely, because your enemies love to preparate your precious skin. You have a pounce move which is somewhat ranged, but when you use it, it will basically disintegrate humies, meaning old Perry the alien goes just a little bit hungry. The big problem in this campaign is the level design. It's like Raven software on steroids. This campaign is by far my least favorite, as it has annoying stop and start gameplay. Once you start fatally groping the help, the game gets really fun, but then you have to figure out how to navigate the rest of the level, which means 5 seconds of groping and 5 hours of wandering around. I streamed this game right to this point. I eventually gave up as I felt the level was bugged. It was not. Instead, you had to destroy this very easily missed panel, and I get the feeling this is where many gamers just gave up. For the purposes of this review, I looked up a walkthrough so I could complete this game legit, but back in the day, I just opened up the console and typed the 2 greatest words in the gaming lexicon: no clip, and thus was able to cheat my way right to victory. And thus we enter the reason why I said critics hated it. According to Wikipedia, they did, and I can kind of see why. On normal difficulties, the game is as hard as Dunya's, never mind, and you will die a lot on normal difficulty. Ammo is very limited and health is almost non-existent. You had better play smart, otherwise you'll be mashing the F6 key over and over again. And this high level of difficulty is due to the fact that the game is only 3 levels long for each of the campaigns, and thus the developers had to find some way to pad the game out. Still though, despite the difficulty padding, the game still has fairly large and open-ended levels, and you're not just shunted from corridor to corridor. The expansion does include a couple new things. Dunya gets Lara Croft-style double pistols, which work well enough, but most of the time you're just going to be sticking to your larger weapons. The Predator gets an absolutely excellent wrist-mounted plasma launcher, which gives you a very good ranged option. Most of the time, though, you're still going to be hitting things with your combi stick, but when you need to shoot enemies that have ranged abilities or shooting sentry turrets, this is your go-to option, as it is fairly powerful and uses very little energy. And you get a couple new enemies, mainly just some flora and fauna that is easily slaughtered, although you have this hentai monster, which I think is immortal. Dunya, better watch out.
Graphics for Aliens vs. Predator Primal Hunt are absolutely positively stupendous for 2002.
I know it doesn't look like it now in the space year 2021, but back in 2002, these graphics were nothing short of amazing. Graphics technology changed tremendously just from year to year back in the early 2000s. Compare this game to AVP Classic 2000. The graphics here are a night and day difference, and it was really only a difference of, at most, a year. That is insane, ladies and gentlemen. The levels, while looking kind of basic to modern eyes, were tremendously more detailed than what had been seen just 2 years prior. The 3D models for the humans actually looked way more human than they did back in the year 2000. The weapon models looked absolutely amazing. And while everything looks pretty low res by today's standards, it was extremely high res compared to AVP Classic 2000. This game looked great. Sadly, after all these years, yeah, it does show its age, but at the same time, it still doesn't look absolutely horrible, and like AVP Classic 2000, it still has that timeless quality that many other games from this time period just don't have. Or maybe I'm just a colossal fanboy. For a game of this vintage, it is quite remarkable how well this bloody thing runs on a modern Windows 10 system. You don't have to do any techno sorcery to get the thing to bloody well run in the first place. You don't have to set primitives, you don't have to download a patch so it doesn't detect devices that don't exist anymore. It just works. And even better, you can download a variety of patches to make it work better. Back in 2009, when I first reviewed AVP2, well, that was your lot. There weren't any patches to make it run at a modern-day screen resolution. Well, in the space year 2021, you can download the Master Server patch and a few others to get the game to display in 2K, and it looks damn good in 2K, no less. The weapon models look a little scrunched in, but that is a small price to pay for a modern screen resolution. The game in the modern screen resolution runs pretty well, except sometimes the game will crash, especially in the Pred-Alien campaign when the cutscenes trigger. You might be able to play the game in 2K, but the menus aren't gonna be. The menus are the original 640x480 and are really quite minuscule. Thankfully though, unlike with AVP Classic 2000 Steam release, the game does not freak out and resize the screen to 640x480 when you go into the menus. In terms of programming, AVP2 Primal Hunt has more than stood the test of time, especially compared to games that came out much later than it. I'm looking at you, Fear One. Like in AVP2, the pulse rifle still doesn't sound quite right, but at least it's far closer than what it sounded like in Alien Bloody 3. The rest of the game's sound is serviceable enough. However, the Predators all have the same voice, and they all make the same repetitive sounds, and are somewhat disappointing. Music for the game is excellent, with the tracks being fairly unique for each campaign. However, the worst by far is, of course, Perry the Alien, with some music that is really weird and not fitting at all for what you're going to be doing most of the time. Voice acting is top tier for 2002. The major characters, such as Dunya and Rykov, sound absolutely excellent and could actually stand tall with modern games today. Thanks to the tireless efforts of AVP Unknown, the game can be played multiplayer without the need of Game Ranger or a LAN connection. All one need do is download the Master Server patch and find a game. The multiplayer for AVP2 is better than I remember. You can choose between human, alien, and predator, and each have a decent balance to one another. Except the Xeno can molt into a bloody queen, making for challenging matches. There are a good number of maps, and they are of impressive design. You can even play on the USM Auriga from Alien Resurrection. I enjoyed this multiplayer quite a bit, and there are games going on to this day. AVP2 and AVP2 Primal Hunt has a good number of gameplay types, but as of this review, I've only played Deathmatch. I played this during the AVP2 Primal Hunt live stream, a number of fans joined, and we had a hell of a time. AVP2/Primal Hunt multiplayer is every bit as good as AVP1's, and it's definitely worth checking out.
As you would expect for a game of this quality, the story is absolutely positively disappointing.
Fooled ya. The story is excellent, and the only disappointing part is that it was never followed up on. Primal Hunt is a prequel. All three of the campaigns are intertwined with one another, and each will have consequences in the other, and this game entirely sets up all of the various events of AVP 2. In other games, you generally play as sympathetic characters. Even the xenomorphs in AVP2 are shown escaping containment to be free from human experimentation. The Preds, while generally villainous, are usually rescuing something, well, mostly we're just gonna ignore that the Preds are mainly out just to, well, kill everyone. As for us humies, we're generally trying to fight to stay alive. Not in this game. In AVP2 Primal Hunt, all of the factions are 100% villainous. Although the human faction does have a tiny bit of sympathy, but you still play as a bad guy, or girl in this case.
Aliens vs. Predator Primal Hunt is another one of those classic games that Twitter seems to have forgotten about, that, you know, had a female protagonist that was equal to all the male protagonists.
The human faction here is represented by the corporate mercenary company known as the Iron Bears, filled with all the great, mostly American-sounding mother Russians, but whatever. They were the human villains in base AVP, and Dunya herself was a minor villain that actually got the player thrown into space jail to be killed. She is a haughty Russian babe, and is never treated with any less respect than the male protagonists in the previous AVP games. She is not made to be a super competent Mary Sue, and has a boyfriend that she actually worries about as she engages in combat. But despite that, she is still a villain, and the game never wants you to take her side. Sadly, due to the truncated nature of this game, the Predator gets absolutely no characterization. He doesn't talk, and he just gestures a couple of times, and that's your lot, ladies and gentlemen. He mainly just rocks up to kill shit and look cool. For the first and only time, we get to play as Perry the Alien. He kills shit. Enough said. We start the game as the sexy Dunya, and that sexiness ain't no lie. We start up with a shower scene of Dunya, and yes, the 3D model is anatomically correct. All you gotta do is just Google it.
Oh dear! Male gaze!
She is ordered to meet up with General Rykov, and thus she has to leave her boyfriend Dmitri to suffer from the most horrid of all ailments, blue balls. She is sent to recover an artifact from Pilot, aka Jockey, aka Engineer ruins. The battle is rough, but she makes it and has to wait while the artifact is scanned. The artifact is a xeno-repeller and could be useful to humanity, although only in really specific circumstances, but whatever. And since this is a game from 2002, she has no phone, and I guess she just stands around like her usual stoic mother Russian. Eventually, the artifact breaks and you have to escape with it. You fight through some Predator ruins and finally get back to the pods. A Predator shows up and makes sure that Dmitri gets blue balls yet again.
Say what you will about skinning people alive, giving that guy blue balls when he's got a babe that beautiful, that's just cruel!
Dunya has to secure the artifact, but fails, as a soon-to-be recognizable villain absconds with it. You are then charged by General Rykov to hold the line until the pod can be blown. There is a bit of tension here as Dunya is left to worry about Dmitri, as he has not been heard from since the attack. For a game this short, it's a nice bit of audiovisual shorthand to make Dunya that much more human. Yeah, she may be a bad guy, but she is not a bad guy. I think even Zangief would have a hard time seeing her as anything other than a villain. But anyway, and she's seen to be caring to those she cares about. And I like seeing that females can actually care about males in media.
What follows is a segment that is every bit as hard as Dunya's nipples.
In lieu of a boss fight, holding the line is the final action you undertake as Dunya. Realistically, a boss fight would be substantially easier, but here you've got one mounted turret and one sentry gun. These are your tools to hold off a gigantic horde of xenomorphs. A boss would be something you just shoot with a chain gun until it dies. The xenomorphs like to get around you, surround you, and slice you to ribbons. And that's gonna happen over and over again. This is a level that has to be played with skill, as you need to husband all your health to this point, and you'd better make damn sure that you took all those sentry guns that were found earlier in the level with you, as one piddly sentry gun will be like spitting into the chitinous wind. Once you get a gun line ready, it's time to sing the Song of Hell's Reach and do battle with your foe. With the Xenos defeated, the pod is dropped, explaining why there is a destroyed pod in AVP2, and Dunya gets a little happy ending as Dimitri survives.
For now.
In AVP2, he dies due to the actions of the player character Hendrix. Oops. And the events of this game make that offhand mention of his death all the more impactful. Dunya would pretty much be the only Iron Bear to survive the events of AVP2, as the epilogue for the Alien campaign in that game explains that she made it out, only to be killed by a predator sometime after. And this would have made for an epic boss fight in an AVP3. She could have been equipped with some sort of hyper-advanced power loader, and you could have been the player character Predator trying to take her down. Festus, the Predator, comes onto the scene 500 years before the start of the events in this game and AVP2. And I call him Festus, since technically he is from the 1800s. He heads down to this planet and does just one thing.
Hunting and fishing. And he's all out of bait.
Literally, in the mission objectives, your mission is just hunt. You break out the combi stick and do some boar spear hunting. I used to play this part over and over again in the early 2000s. Eventually, Festus finds the pilot ruins and the artifact. Festus, wanting a hunting lodge for the rest of us, decides to use the xeno-repelling power of the artifact as a means of guarding his new pimp-ass lodge. He invites his hunting buddies, William and Robert, over for an evening of gentlemanly pursuits. Sadly, after a game of beer pong gone bad, Robert spills some Prednog on the keyboard controlling the artifact, thus letting the Xenos attack the base. And judging by Robert and William's actions, that was some good shit they be drinking, cause damn. Festus tries to get everything under control, but inadvertently freezes himself for 500 years. In the world of tomorrow, Festus must use all his stealthing abilities to sneak into this pod to or just bust in like a bloody Bavarian, and of course no one notices that. You eventually get the precious, but alas, the Predator didn't use a space condom, and rather surprisingly gives birth to a chestburster. 2 seconds before succumbing to space heart disease, Festus was able to send out a message to the Predator currently known as Prince, thus setting in motion the events for the AVP2 Predator campaign. This ending would also be ripped off by Paul W.S. Anderson for his terrible AVP film. If you played these campaigns out of order, you would pretty much be able to expect this, because the last thing you do as a facehugger in the Pred-Alien campaign is jump on old Festus, thus killing him. Your main objective here is to get the artifact because the Queen wants it now. Thankfully, of all the people that try to get the bloody artifact, Perry doesn't get it. At the end of the game, no one gets the artifact, but the Pred-Alien does survive to fight and kill another day.
Or does he? Not for long.
In AVP2, you come across a couple of Pred-Aliens on a large pipe, and you get to show them the error of their ways. So hopefully, the Predator currently known as Prince got to avenge the mighty Festus.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is Primal Hunt. The critics hated it, but I loved it.
The only issue I had with the game back in the 2000s was that it ran like crap on my old Dell computer, with frame rates dipping into the 20s, especially with the hordes of Xenos swarming around. The levels in combat were as good as base AVP2s, and for a young teen in the early 2000s, Dunya was my mother Russian waifu. The weakest part of the game was the Perry Alien campaign, but I get it. They were short on time and money, and they did their best with what they had. It's not lazy or terrible, it's just annoying. Primal Hunt left us wanting oh so much more. The artifact is a great MacGuffin, and I would have loved an AVP3. Sadly, myself and the AVP fan community would be blueballed just like poor Dimitri. After reviewing this game, it makes me want to go back to AVP2 again. Yeah, I reviewed it back in 2009, and it was one of my earliest reviews, but I can talk about it again, can't I? I can at least do a video on it that doesn't sound like I recorded it with a tin bloody can. So yes, in 2022, we will be taking another look at AVP2. 2.
As you would expect, despite the high difficulty, this is a game that I highly recommend. It may take a little searching, but it can be found if you're willing to look. And so, I'm GeneralLotz, wishing you good aliens extermination and good aliens extinction, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment